All right. Hello, everybody. It is 4:30 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday, which means it's time for office hours on the ViaMonstra Academy. This is where you can ask questions about Intune, Config Manager, PowerShell, MDT, and everything in between. Let's get this thing going. All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I'll be flying solo as Johan is out attending the MVP Global Summit in Redmond at Microsoft. So I'll be doing my best to answer as much as I can. I hope everybody's been having a great week so far. I've got a few exciting updates that I wanted to share today and spend a few minutes talking about the upcoming MMS conference that we've talked about pretty frequently here. So I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on the chat here and get as many questions and everything answered as possible today. If you notice any issues or anything with my stream, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll do my best to correct them without Johan here today. So, all right, I'll just hop into it here. A few updates that I came across. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, make sure I can do this all right. And first thing, our friends over at the MSEndpointMgr blog, they have a new intro to their YouTube channel. We're extremely thankful for all of the great contributions that crew provides to the community. We've talked about several of their solutions and articles here on Office Hours. So I just wanted to call this out. Recommend you go check out their channel and their blog, of course. Very great content over there. It's become quite a sizable crew, which is great. We're very fortunate to have all of them in the community. So wanted to call that out. I also came across an article from Kaido on how to update the Windows Server Active Directory schema for the latest version of Windows LAPS. So we've talked about here over the last couple of weeks that there's quite a few updates that have come with LAPS, including the native integration in the OS so that you don't have to have install a separate MSI anymore on the clients to actually utilize LAPS. So this is useful to make sure that your schema is updated to support this latest version, or if you've never run LAPS before in your environment, this should help get you started. On that note, I believe last week when we discussed LAPS, Johan mentioned, or maybe 2 weeks ago, Johan mentioned that there were some issues. It's a big quite a few conversations surrounding this on Twitter last week, where let me just go ahead and pull this up. If you installed the legacy LAPS GPO on a machine that was patched with last week's cumulative update, or security update rather, and applied that policy, both LAPS and legacy LAPS will break. So basically, this was something, there were a couple of workarounds here in that banner. You can uninstall legacy LAPS or delete these specific registry values. But I just wanted to call out that since we talked about this, it was confirmed that the fixes for this issue will be available in the next release. So we would expect this to come out in the May cumulative update. And then lastly, in terms of updates, just yesterday, I believe, Johan merged the pull request this morning, actually. But I talked a little bit about updates to the 2019 hydration kit, maybe last month or in February. Finally got around to adding many of those same updates to the 2022 hydration kit. So you can see here in this commit message, added some client task sequences, both for Windows 10 and Windows 11. updated some scripts to make sure that the VMs for those client task sequences are actually created if you want to use them in your lab. We're continuing to go through and replace some of the old VB scripts that were in the hydration kit with PowerShell scripts. So you'll see that here as an example, where we used to create the Active Directory structure in the domain controller that's created with a VB script, now with a customizable PowerShell script. We've converted a lot of the logging that was configured in each specific PowerShell script. We've moved that into a module to reduce the size of the various scripts themselves. So now we can just import that module and we have logging available to us. And then a couple of other updates. And then I know a big one that's been discussed here in the community recently is changing the default network from 192.168.1.0/24 to 25.0/24. And that update was just made just to help avoid some confusion or in some cases conflicts with a lot of the home networks that a lot of us are obviously dealing with. So there's still a lot more to come, but I wanted to make sure that I just highlighted that these changes have now made their way into the 2022 kit. So those were the updates that I had for the last week. As I mentioned, we've got the MVP Global Summit going on, so I know a lot of those MVPs are out in Redmond, been focused on that, so I haven't seen too many other updates this week. If there have been some other big ones I missed, I apologize, and hope we can grab them next week, or if anybody has anything they'd like to share in the chat, I'd be happy to pop that up as well. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, we're coming up on, I think we are 12 days away from the MMS conference up in Minnesota at the Mall of America. So this is a conference that Johan and I have attended. I don't know that he's missed one. I've missed only one since 2015. Phenomenal conference. I'm sure many of you have heard a lot about it, but I wanted to just take a few minutes to go through some of the sessions that Johan and I are speaking at. If any of you are watching and are attending MMS, hopefully some of these will catch your eye and we'll see you at some of our sessions. So I will start with my speaker schedule here. And so I've got a few sessions coming up with a few different people. One is one that I was asked to present with Jørgen Nielsen. This is a pretty cool one. Basically, we're going to be talking about customizing Windows 11 to make it more user-friendly and secure, decreasing the attack vector of the operating system itself, and then some usability and UI changes that you can make that may make the operating system a little bit more user-friendly for your users. So we've got two options for that. The first option is going to be right away on Monday morning at 10 a.m. And then on Tuesday, we're giving that session again at 1 p.m. Then at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, my friend Nathan Zienert and I are putting together one of the fun beer sessions. These are a lot of fun, but give us the opportunity to do some interesting things and learn a couple of things while we get the crowd involved and that sort of thing. Have a little bit of fun with the session, but we're basically coming to use some humorous scenarios where we have some petty examples of issues that we're dealing with and bringing some Azure services to the table on how to solve them. So it's a lot of fun. Like I said, these beer sessions are great at the end of a long day of a ton of great learning. And this is up against another very, very popular standard session, the tips and tricks session, which is another great one. But hopefully some of you can make it to this one as well. And then Johan and I are giving a presentation on cloud imaging. So this, we kind of talk about some of the ways that you can deploy Windows 10 and 11 with no local infrastructure at all, other than internet access. So you can do things like we have options for USB boot media, Pixie booting over the internet, and some other things that we'll talk about. Some of these we've touched on a little bit, as questions come up in office hours, but we'll dive into them a little bit further during this session. And then last but not least, for me, I was also asked to co-present with David Segura on Windows provisioning packages. So in this session, we'll sort of go through the basics of what provisioning packages are, what they can do, how to use them, and the different types of packages that you can create, and the different ways of actually getting them out and applied on the OS itself. So some really cool stuff here. I'm happy to be joining on all of these. I'm extremely excited. Now, if we pop over to Johan's schedule here, he also has some very great sessions. One that he is doing with George and Ilias on PSD. So this session is going to be talks a little bit about the history here of MDT. And MDT, as you may know, is built almost entirely on VB script. And these guys and some of the other contributors to the PSD project have started to convert a lot of that over to PowerShell to continue working with that product. So they're going to go through sort of the development diaries of the crew that contributes to this, or at least some of the crew that contributes to that project, and how they managed to release this open source solution. So I'm looking forward to this. This is a great one. Another couple exciting ones here. Johan and Michael Niehaus are putting together a notes from the field session on upgrading to Windows 11. So some of the lessons that they've both learned just through upgrading various makes, models, going from one version to the next, that sort of thing. They talk about some of the common issues that they've run into, workarounds, and things that they've figured out actually work and help make this process run more smoothly. And then last but not least, for Johan, Johan and Maurice Daly are going to be doing a session where they're going to talk about managing drivers and BIOS using both ConfigMgr and Intune. So this is an exciting one. This one comes up for us quite a bit. So like all the rest of these, of course, I'm very excited to see them and very excited to be there and present some of these sessions. I definitely want to mention that it's not too late to register, though we are 12 days out. Registration is still available. So if this is something that you are on the fence about and you're able to make it, I highly, highly recommend it. So you can find that link here. I'll make sure that we put it in the chat for this evening. And I should also mention, let's see, where's the what's new? I'll just mention again, we've mentioned it previously, so I'll put the link for it in today's links. But basically, I was going to mention again, being able to join the Discord. So great community that's coming together there, the MMS Discord server. So I'll make sure to drop that invite link in there for today as well. So those are sort of the updates that I had for today. Thank you for listening. And like I said, if some of you are coming up to MMS, please feel free to join our sessions. I'd be happy to have you there and meet in person. All right, so let's pop over to the chat here. Got a few things coming in, it looks like. Hey, Robert, thanks for joining us again today. Happy to see you here. So a question related to MMS. Neil, I see your question, but since I was talking about MMS already, I see one here. Question was, are all of these sessions recorded for us that can't travel to the conference? MMS is not recorded. What I would recommend, though, so one of the benefits of MMS, I'll put out there, is that it's also a great networking event of sorts. It's a small conference. I believe this year it's capped at about 750. And so what's done with MMS is it's all kind of kept in-house and use that as an opportunity to get everybody up there, talk through, issues that they're having and things like that, and do some of that networking. Um, what I would recommend, though, is pay attention to things like Twitter, pay attention to the MMS Discord. Some of those things that Johan and I often talk about, anyways, is being, following along in the community. And oftentimes, not always, I don't want to promise anything that I'm not able to promise, but oftentimes what you'll see after MMS is a lot of the solutions or issues that were talked about will pop up in blog posts or YouTube videos or something along those lines. So I would definitely pay close attention to the community those couple of weeks following MMS for sure. And you may see some of the content or similar content that came out of that conference. Just as an example, if I go to Johan's blog here, let me see if I can find these. So here's a good example. We put together some. So the speakers have to do one-on-one sessions. Not we're signed up for them, but we enjoy doing them. These are great sessions where people can come and schedule a few minutes with the speakers and talk through some of the challenges that they're seeing in their organization or that they're coming up against with some of the systems that we work with. And last year, these were called camping sessions. So here's a great example. Johan and I had some camping sessions last year, and we had a few people came and asked us about specific things like Azure AD cleanup. How do we keep devices cleaned up in Azure AD or in autopilot? Some conversation surrounding log analytics, connected cache, and various issues like I mentioned. And what we did while we were going through these camping sessions is just tried to record some of the links that were related to these specific categories and posted them up here on Johan's blog. So not necessarily a full solution here, but this is one example of the things that you may see coming out of this conference. So great question, though. All right. So another question from Neil here. Have you found the new restricted collection in ConfigMgr device collections? I have not had too much time over the last couple of weeks to dig into 2303. Assuming is that what version you're talking about, Neil? The new 2303 version? I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. So let's see what we've got here. And we can also look for ConfigMgr 2303 here. I love some what's new documentation. 2111, the new collection of devices that are Intune ready. Okay. Interesting. So let me see. I'm trying to think of which one that is. Just doing a little searching over here. So I wonder, is that this one the co-management eligible devices collection? Yeah, so I think this is really, actually, I haven't had to use this collection too much, but great question. I believe that, I wonder if I can find the specific query for this, but I believe this is, this will show devices that meet the prereqs for being co-managed. So there's going to be things like um, Azure AD joined, hybrid Azure AD joined, specific OS versions, which at this point should be pretty much anything that's supported, at least as far as Windows 10 goes. But you may see, so if I click on this, I'm probably only going to see, yep, endpoints. So Windows desktop operating systems here. Whereas if I go to my let's say my all desktop and server clients collection here, you're probably going to see a few extra servers, but they're not going to be co-managed. They're not going to be eligible for co-management, excuse me, because they are servers and they can't be enrolled into Intune. So I hope that helps. Really, I think that's what's going to help determine which devices actually can be enrolled into Intune that already have the ConfigMgr client on them. Yep. Read-only collection. Yep. So basically any of these collections, all systems, provisioning devices, unknown computers, any that have this SMS collection ID, all the built-in read-only ones. But I believe that's it. Those are going to be the things that you'll see in there. Let me take a look here real quick too. I wonder if having the ConfigMgr client installed would actually be a prereq for this collection. But those are the things that I would think off the top of my head. Either Azure AD joined or hybrid Azure AD joined before they show up in this collection, and supported Windows operating system. If I find out any more before next week's office hours, though, I'll be sure to add to that. Great question. Let me see. Yeah, so that's the description. That's the description that they have here that I just found. I'll just put this up real quick. Is this the right page? Yeah, here's not the doc itself, but the GitHub link for the doc. And these are the built-in collections here. And for that, it says contains devices that meet the client prereqs and are eligible for co-management enrollment. So I think that's going to follow along some of those prereqs that I mentioned. Cool. Great way to monitor what you've got out there using that collection. All right. Any other questions out there? Quite a bit of time left, about 35 minutes. Otherwise, even without Johan here, I'll talk about Mandalorian season finale tonight. Nobody can escape my Star Wars conversations. I am definitely looking forward to that. But I'm definitely going to stick around here for a couple of minutes. Any any questions I am happy to try to tackle, even if they're things that um, Johan would normally tackle. Lisa, I saw Lisa on LinkedIn just joined but has a random question. Please, no Star Wars. All right, I'll spare you. I've said enough about Star Wars for the day. But if you want to go ahead and put your question in the chat, I will try to answer it. Neil, how are we SCCM guys supposed to know more than the smart users? Great question. Some tips that I think we talk about that you'll hear from either Johan or myself, and it gets it can be challenging, of course, especially with so many different technologies and everything that that we have to work with in this space. But of course, following along in the community, trying to keep up with um, the rapid pace of the news that comes out and everything. And that's one of the things that we try to do with office hours is, take and review some of the things that have happened over the last week to help keep you all updated on what we're seeing going on. That's oftentimes just scratches the surface of what's happening out there, but that's one method. Also, Twitter, of course, the MMS Discord that I mentioned, the WinAdmins Discord server is another great resource. Trying to keep up with these things. Been a member of that community for many years now. Love that community, but a lot of it comes back to community, relying on the community. Secondly, is having the home lab. So both of us are big proponents of having that home lab for things like, where I'm sharing my 2303 site server here. Well, 2303 is still in the fast ring, but I'm not concerned about installing that on my home lab. That's something that I can play around with and see what's different, what's changed, what's broken, what's working better. And that's one method. So if you've been on here before with us, you've probably heard us say that before, but that's a huge thing for us. There's also if you are interested in learning more about what we would recommend for a home lab, of course, shameless plug, but as Johan would say, the price is right. There is a free mini course here on building the perfect lab for ConfigMgr, MDT, and Intune. So there is a recording available from last month's session. There's not a live session. The next live session isn't scheduled yet, but highly recommend this too if you don't have a home lab today and this is something that you'd be interested in hopping into. We're big proponents of that. And just to add, as I'm looking back over at the chat here, no, absolutely zero Star Wars spoilers. None. I would never. And I hope nobody else would either. So I hope that helps, Neil. This is something, as I've said, we've got that both of us are big proponents of, and this is what sort of helps us do our best to stay on top of those things. So, all right, let's see here. Any suggestions on managing desktop wallpaper and lock screen images? Think about that for a second. I've got a couple of ideas, but I don't know if I can get to them right now. So not enforcing them. basically, so I'm not sure. It looks like that question came in from no username, but when not enforcing it, do you mean just being able to change it from the you're setting it as an admin, and then users are able to change it if they want, I suppose is the clarification I'm looking for. And I suppose it's also different if it would be using Intune or GPO. So, for example, Neil, you just mentioned the CCM exec website, Jurgen's website. He has an article on replacing the default paper in wallpaper in Windows 10 using scripts back from 2015 is one example. And I'm pretty sure he's got some others as well, but maybe not. Yeah. GPO preferences. Yep. And here Jurgen also has another article on customizing Windows 11. So these may help a little bit. I will throw them in our list of links. And if there are any others that I can find, I will add them in as well. All right. Getting back to Lisa's question here from LinkedIn, I have a client who is looking to mass apply a WinRE update. We followed the Microsoft documentation and were able to successfully install the update. Is there a way to report on what version of WinRE is currently installed on a large mass of machines? This is from their ticket. We need to update 6,000 machines. Having issues trying to find any method to update on a large scale. We found documents on how to do them one at a time. I've not found any documentation on. All right, so it sounds like okay, so it sounds like you've got the update installed, but you're looking to report on what version of WinRE is currently on large massive machines. Let me see. See if I can come up with something here for you. Not finding anything quickly, but that is an interesting question. So here's, obviously I'm finding a few things about actually doing the updates. But nothing on reporting, at least not that I can find at the moment. Trying to see if there's an inventory for that or anything as well. If anybody else has any ideas, please feel free to pop that into the chat. I'm going to make a note of that as well, Lisa, see if I can get you any more answers. I can't promise anything, but I'll see if I can find anything. Great question. Just making a note to myself here. All right, let's see. Awesome, some great conversation going on in the chat here. Any blog posts for recommending group structures for app deployment, autopilot groups to ensure a good structure is in play to build on? Specifically, how to control hybrid versus Azure AD join, dynamic user versus device, when to use one or another, when's best to use users versus device. And then I saw Neil followed up. Define user groups, then go or send it back to management, then ask then ask them where to dig the hole. That's right. It really does depend on, I would say, how you want to, what works for your organization. You know, the modern way of doing that would be building out those groups, building out user groups, and assigning applications to user groups. That would be one way to do it, especially if you're doing available applications. I would assign those out to users. Hopefully I've got your question right here. Would assign those out to users. Dynamic user versus device. Dynamic's an interesting one because if you just use the built-in dynamic Azure AD groups, which I really like for a lot of use cases, the problem with those is that you can't force them to update, which may or may not be a problem for your organization, but you can run into some timing issues where you would expect the application to be assigned to a user, but that user hasn't become a member of a group yet, as an example. Same with devices. If you're using dynamic device groups, that can definitely happen in an autopilot scenario. Device groups, I like when you're doing required application assignments. So if you've got, you want every single device in your organization that goes through autopilot or something like that, or is enrolled into Intune, you want them to have, Notepad++, an application that we use for example, or for a lot of our examples. Assign that to a device group as required, and you're good to go there. So I don't know if that answers your question entirely. It's definitely an "it depends" question, but I hope some of those tips or comments would help at least a little bit. But if you have any follow-ups or anything, feel free to pop them in the chat. All right, what are recommendations for Windows Update for Business patch compliance reports? Looking at which patches are installed on machines in an update ring. When patched via software update groups, we can use patch compliance reports in ConfigMgr. I do have some solutions for that. So there are the Windows Update for Business reports. Is one. So this is just the standard documentation for Windows Update for Business reports, but I'll show you what these reports actually look like here in a moment in my tenant. I just wanted to get this link to make sure that I made it available after the fact. Windows Update for Business reports, if we pop into M365 Admin Center here, and go to Health and Software Updates. And we click on the Windows tab. See, it took a minute for this to change over as it populates information from my tenant. But this basically allows your devices to upload patch compliance information to Log Analytics. So if I click here, Configure Settings, you can see that I have an Azure subscription selected as well as a Log Analytics workspace. So your devices upload that information to Log Analytics, and then if we go over to Windows Update for Business Reports, this is where it will all be visualized. So with the new Windows Update for Business reports, which replaced Update Compliance, if you've come across the Update Compliance solution from years past, this requires Azure AD or hybrid Azure AD joined devices. But what we'll get here is loading slowly for me today. I'm going to blame it on the spring storm that we've got rolling through here. But here you can see, we can start to see some information on the devices. I know a lot of these haven't been patched from last week yet because they've mostly been off. But we can see the update status here as well as the feature update status. And then we can go in and drill down on some of these devices here. So we can sort by OS version and update classification in this tab. Let me see if I click on here. We can see some information about some of the updates that were installed for a particular device. So I saw the follow-up question here. Does it give detail on which patches, for example, Andrew's device were installed? That is a good question. I don't know if it shows the entire patch history or just shows, I think it's just going to show the latest status of the latest patch here. So let's go, I click on 22H2 before. And for some reason, these don't even have the device name in them, which is odd. So this does give more of a high-level overview. We can do some drilling down here, of course. So if I go to, let's go to the device status tab. Here we can see specific devices, and I could filter on a device name, or even I assume here that I could filter on device ID. There we go. And things like that. So we do have this as an option. This is high level. We can drill down into specific devices, but it's not quite as easy here to say, I want this group of devices, at least from anything I've come across. Now, one of the other reporting solutions that we talk about quite a bit is from the folks over at MSEndpointMgr. Now, if I go here and go to my reports, and go to my workbooks, and I want to believe it is this one is the latest version. Nope, that is my update compliance settings. How about this one? Yeah, this looks right. So I know this is the latest version out there. I know that they were working on some updates for the new surrounding the new Windows Update for Business reports, but this information basically comes from both the Windows Update for Business reports, or originally the Update Compliance reports, as well as a custom inventory script. that uploads information to a log analytics workspace. So here we might be able to get a little bit more information. We can, based on history and things like that, so we can see how our patch compliance was looking over the past up to 120 days. We can, again, drill down into the details of a device here. This may give a little bit more, in terms of history, but that's also going to depend on how much you're storing in your log analytics workspace. So this will give some history. But again, I haven't seen much about grouping those devices. Neil, I saw that you made a comment here that you can use group tags to set groups of devices. That is pretty cool. I did not know that. So that may be helpful, especially if you're using autopilot. I agree. Some of this is very high level. And then on the other side, you've also got where you can just drill down directly into one of the devices, but it's still not going to give quite as much reporting information as that you may find in ConfigMgr for sure. But these are a couple of the options that you have for reporting on patch compliance today in Intune or when using Windows Update for Business. And Neil, I really appreciate you hopping into the chat here and providing your feedback as well. Thank you very much. All right. Anything else with 12 minutes to spare? Oh, I saw, you know what? Let me see if I missed something here. I think I did. That's right. Robert asked a little bit ago, asked Johan last week on his perspective of pre-staging. He was doing some research on it. Robert, I don't know if he got anywhere on that, but I will make sure to give him a reminder. Just making a note to myself here real quick. Right, let me see if I've got any other questions that I've missed here. Great comments, Neil. Does Johan sell the mastering Intune courses you guys do each quarter in your library? So we've got a couple. There are a couple of different courses. There is the mastering Intune course, which we have one coming up in August. Let me see. Is it on there yet? There it is. So we've got this one here. There's the Mastering Intune course. This is a week-long course with several people, many of whom I have looked up to for a very long time. So this is a great week-long session, live session, hands-on training. There's labs available and everything. We do quite a few deep dives and a lot of great information across an entire 5-day period. When you join this, there are you have access to the recordings, you have access to that lab, a lot of great benefits of joining for this one. And then we also have our quarterly courses, which are 2 hours Intune, the Intune course in particular. So this is Windows 10 and Windows 11 management using Intune. These go for 2 hours every Monday from 2 to 4 p.m. for 6 weeks. Obviously, sometimes we run into holidays and things like that we have to skip a Monday. Um, but that's the gist. Uh, so those sessions available as a recording? Yes, these all get recorded. So if you um, have joined for this one, or if you do join this one, or even get an all access pass on the Academy, where you get access to um, all of the various different trainings for a year, the recordings are absolutely available. Uh, so, and you would have access to those as well. So I hope that answers your question. And the same thing with the mastering course. Yep. Um, in Australia, so timing's hard for live attendance. Yep, we actually have had I think at least 2 people that have joined from Australia, and I commend them and everybody else that joins on the opposite side of the world for these things. So I don't have anything to announce or anything like that, but we've heard that feedback and appreciate that feedback. So um, maybe in the future we'll be able to do something on a different time zone, but we don't have any plans to do that at the moment. So appreciate that feedback, though, definitely. Um, let's see here. Robert, I see you're asking a question, but I don't see. Not sure if you got the second part in there yet. There we go. Company is going through a long, slow merge of 5 companies. 2 are integral. We have 2 on-premises systems, no hybrid, and the rest are going directly to Intune. All are under WFB. There are certain servers and workstations excluded, which the on-premises handle. It's a prescribed way to keep WSUS updates from Windows Update for Business updates. Um, sorry, Robert, I don't think I'm quite following. Prescribed way to keep the WSUS updates from the Windows Update for Business updates. So Robert's asking, he's in a situation where his company is going through a long, slow merge of 5 companies. 2 are integral. We have 2 on-premises systems, no hybrid, and the rest are going directly to Intune. All are under, I believe, Windows Update for Business. There are certain servers and workstations excluded, which the on-premises systems handle. Is there a prescribed way to keep WSUS updates from Windows Update for Business updates? If I'm understanding that, if I'm reading that question correctly, Robert. Hope I am. Just keeping an eye out on the chat here on YouTube. So Neil's just adding in the chat here, kind of some ideas surrounding, which when you go which way, if depending on what the SLA is for the business, just let everything update. If you need a shorter SLA, put WSUS in place. Thanks, Neil, for the additions there. With going native Azure AD join, does that not negate the need for WSUS? Not necessarily. I mean, you could be native Azure AD joined and still be co-managed and still get your updates from ConfigMgr, especially with a CMG. But if you're heading towards that cloud native route, anyways, in my opinion, Neil, I saw your comments earlier about ConfigMgr and WSUS as well. For yes, need to be co-managed. That's right. Yeah, in my opinion, if you're pushing towards that cloud native model, anyways, where you're native Azure AD join and Intune only, I would stick with Windows Update for Business. Do we get a lot of asks for Azure AD join only? Yes, I would say yes, and that seems to be from my seat. Johan may have a different perspective, but I see a lot of just going straight Azure AD join. We're getting more questions about that. That seems to be the way that the community has started to trend towards. We've shared a couple of links. And I will actually make sure to add them into the links collection for today, because I do have to drop off here shortly, and we're at 5:30. But there are a couple of links that we've shared that talk about sort of the pros and cons of going hybrid, and Microsoft's poured a lot of resources and work into making sure Azure AD join only will support a lot of the scenarios that only hybrid Azure AD would have supported, several years back. So I'll make sure to. I'm just going to make a quick note to myself, and to add those links on hybrid versus Azure AD join. So. All right. I hope, and I know that we've got a little bit of conversation still going on here in the chat. So I apologize, but I do have to run. I sincerely appreciate everybody sticking around, asking some questions, listening to just me today. I don't know if it's as fun listening to just me as it is when we've got Johan here as well. Neil, a special thank you again to you for hopping into the chat and getting involved and giving some of your opinion and helping out. And thank you again for everybody that joined today. Hope that we'll see you next week. For those of you that I mentioned we would try to follow up on things, I will try to get with Johan over the next week and see what we can bring to the table next Wednesday. So again, thank you for joining, and see you all next week. Have a great day.